How are you? All well? All good at home?
All good, yeah. All good at home.
Yeah. Okay. We have about 8, 9 people who are tuning in, so I think we should start with the discussion. And I think gradually, once people keep coming in, we'll address some questions in the middle as well. So thank you everyone for coming in for this session, for joining us in the afternoon on a Sunday, and thank you, Susan ma'am, for being so kind enough to join in on such short notice for this discussion. As you all know, today's topic that we're going to be covering is a very interesting one. It's very dear to the work that we at Swechha also do. It's actually relating to promoting young environmental stewards in and across schools within the capital city, and of course within schools all across the country as well. And we're going to be talking about a lot of interesting themes ranging from environmental stewardship, promoting sustainability in schools, environmental education within the core curriculum of the schools. And we're very, very happy and excited to have someone who has been a close partner for us for the last 5 years, Susan ma'am. She's actually been working. She has an experience of over 30 years in the education space, and I'm sure she'll be able to talk to you all more about her experience over the years and how things have changed over the years as well. So I'm going to leave it to you, Susan ma'am, to start the discussion with an interesting question that I wanted to ask you right from the beginning itself, which is related to the importance around environmental education, in particular in the current situation that we're living in. Keeping in mind, of course, the fact that we are currently facing a pandemic. We're in the middle of a global pandemic as we speak. It's a public health crisis. Just looking at, of course, what has been happening over the last 5, 6 years, or maybe even the last decade, in terms of environmental issues, climate change. My first question to you is more on the notion of environmental education within the curriculum itself. How important do you think it is, and how has it changed in your experience over the last 30 years of working in this space?
Thank you very much, Ashim, for having had me on this live video session with you. Indeed, my pleasure. Yeah, to think about this term, environment education itself came into being in the year 1986. That's when the National Curriculum Framework brought it in. Yeah. And all schools, people used it as they wanted. And as the years went by, NCF also, there were some schools that took it as did not take it as an extra subject, just as an extra activity that was there. But then there was a time, then a few years down the line, of course, in my early years as a teacher, I've always been a nature club person. So from there, it changed on, the term changed on to environment education. Then it went on into sustainability. Right now, I think more than environment education, the right term that we could use would be sustainable environment and sustainability, especially keeping in mind the pandemic that we are going through as well. I think that would be a better term. And environment education right now, we would say that is very important in the curriculum. Most schools have it integrated into their curriculum itself. They have cross-curricular kind of projects that are there. And so, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, also has been added on to this broad topic of environment education, sustainability, climate change, and SDGs. All these are woven into this one thing that you call as environment education. Yeah. So maybe in the primary classes, you look at it as an EVS, where you tell them about the social environment, just what an environment is. But as they go into higher classes, you would find that it changes. It becomes a little more serious. After all, at the end of it, your learning outcome should be that your students have been able to make informed choices after having looked at what the environmental issues are, what the impact of their particular actions would be.
Yeah. So yeah, very interestingly how you brought up the fact that, it's just giving us a background in terms of how the term environmental education came into existence, and then how that has slowly shaped into what today we're looking at, just a larger issue of environment and sustainability, and in particular the Sustainable Development Goals. So for everyone who is tuning in right now, Susan ma'am has worked extensively on the SDGs with youth, and in fact, she's if you see the write-up, a lot of people actually, ma'am, when we posted about you on the page as well, a lot of people were saying that it's amazing with the kind of experience, and it's actually inspirational to see someone who has such a vast background in this space, because it's not something that I mean, if we talk about environment specifically in our country itself, these issues, whether it's, broadly looking at climate change, or if it's even speaking about air pollution or water pollution or different issues, I think it's only been in the last couple of years that we've actually seen these issues make it to primetime news when people actually speak up. I mean, if you look at global campaigns that are happening, what Greta is doing on the ground, or what several other youth are doing through campaigns, both in the city or in the country or at a global level as well. So of course it is picking up, and I think the whole dynamic has changed primarily, of course, because of the situation that we are in today with regards to our issues that we're facing. So my next question to you is actually along the lines, because you had also mentioned, of course, and we know that you've done a lot of work around curriculum design and really integrating environment into the core curriculum and while working. So actually I wanted to, if you could probably share with our viewers a little bit more into the kind of methodology classroom as well as out that you use both within the classroom and outside the classroom in terms of promoting sustainable habits within students and trying to see that behavioral change take place.
Okay. Actually, just responding to that one comment that you made, that you had a lot of people commenting about what they've learned, because a lot of them are my students that I have taught. And so it's extremely gratifying to see that some of them have remembered and do take up environment seriously. So that's very, very gratifying. Yeah, coming to the question of curriculum and how it can be designed in order to make sure that your sustainability and environment issues are woven into it. In fact, at the foundation school where I was working till recently, what we did was we took up the SDGs. The SDGs basically touch on different issues of the environment and sustainability as such. So we would take up that and make projects based on that. And that particular project, we would first look at what would be the learning outcome if we are going to take this up. What is the activities that we can do across 2 or 3 classes? Make it a cross-curricular one where you would have a little, like we did this project with you on water with Switcher. We did this one with water, and water is a topic that is done in EVS in class 5 as well as a science topic in class 7. So what we did was, so besides the conceptual understanding that the children got when the teacher did a regular lesson, they also did a lot of activities, like they went to the river Yamuna, which accompanied them. They tested the water. They saw for themselves the microorganisms that were there and how that could cause harm. And then they also did a kind of a survey on that, which they exchanged with another country in the world. So you see, there is all these 21st century skills are also being intertwined into that.
Yeah.
So it needs a lot of collaboration from the teachers as well as the students.
Yeah, and I think like you brought up, which is probably bringing me to the next point, is so the work that we do at Switcher in terms of keeping it as experiential as possible. So if you're studying about water, you actually go and see the river, because that's where 70% of your water that you're consuming is coming from. I mean, of course, when we ask students, like for example, the session that I took with students, the first question I asked them is, where does your water come from? And everyone either says it comes from the tap or it comes from an aquaguard. No one really says River Yamuna, because they haven't come face to face with that river. They haven't really seen the quality of the water and the fact that 70% of the water supply is coming from this river directly. So the idea to take them to see where their trash ends up in a landfill, or where their water actually comes from, to see a river or to see a landfill or to see a forest, to actually understand your trees, is the experiential part of it. So my next question is sort of linked to that, which is around your experience of seeing how there has been a clear difference between textbook learning and in-classroom learning versus actually being on the ground. And in your experience in particular, maybe if you would like to speak more about your work with Foundation School of late, is how have you seen that sort of behavioral change come into students when they've actually been on the ground learning? So for example, if they go for a river walk and they come back, do you see a change versus if they watch a film in a classroom, or if they're just involved in a classroom discussion? And how do you see that comparison? If you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I can give you 2 or 3 examples of that as well. the experiential learning makes the child think on his head, literally, because when the child has gone for a walk along the river Yamuna, seen for himself what is the yucky water that we are getting in our taps, and the fact that then they saw the water, tested it under the microscope, and then were able to talk about it. And when they found out, when they sent out a questionnaire to a Bangladeshi school, yes, their water was bad, but in a European country, I think it was Italy that they sent to, they really don't have a problem with water as such. So we also know that there are certain things that has to be an attitudinal and a behavioral change that has to come about in individuals if you want to keep your rivers clean.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, with that, maybe a history teacher could explain to the children, there was once upon a time, Thames was such a dirty river, and now with the proper kind of information, knowledge, skill that children as who have grown into adults have got it, that river is clean. And so that's something that we can do, not something that we cannot.
Exactly.
And I would say during this pandemic that we are in, we should actually be talking about these things to the children. So that becomes experiential. Why did this pandemic come about? What is the reason? And y'all are you've been advised to use so much of water to wash your hands. During that 20 seconds, are you shutting that water off? If you're going to have your pipe running all that time, so these are, things that you can even do on an online class in an interactive session with children. And I think till class 8, you have that flexibility of teachers thinking of not completing my syllabus, but looking at a curriculum where there is experiential learning. Talk about the pandemic. What is it that caused it? Show them how to live with it. Now, during the summer months, water might become a scarcity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is there said water recycling that we can do within the house itself? So there is also through this a community build up because the parent and the child is also going to work on it.
Yeah, and that's linking to how you're actually looking at various stakeholders, which is what in my last conversation we had last week with Pragati from So Good as well. And she spoke about building a community. It's not just about working with the youth, it's also about engaging equally with the parents or equally with the educators involved. And so she builds a community of food growers, which is really amazing because to see a kid in say 5th grade or 6th grade actually knowing more than say me or say someone else about vegetables and can actually identify every single veggie leaf within an instant, it shows that connect is coming within them with regards to where their food actually comes from or what their food really looks like. Because I can notice a full vegetable, but maybe I won't be able to identify the leaf. But these students are actually able to figure that out because they're learning on the ground. There is a question in the comment section, if you'd like to take that. Someone asked, for someone who doesn't work in a school, how can one approach a school to convince them that they need to inculcate sustainability into the curriculum? So as a head teacher and as a principal, if you'd like to address that.
I think by and large now schools have incorporated sustainability into their curriculum. I mean, it is part of the new education policy. It is in the form of a draft still, but it's nearly ready. That also does talk about bringing in sustainability, especially in schools, because if we do not teach our children to value nature, I think this pandemic has come at the right time because it has allowed us to rethink and reboot ourselves and rewire ourselves to see as to how are we going to look at the earth, the environment around us when we come out.
Exactly.
I don't think any school is averse to having sustainability in their school.
Yeah.
Every school has it. It is the need of the hour.
Yeah.
Whichever part of the world you are in. Because it has a health impact, it has a socio-economic impact, it has an emotional impact.
Yeah, it's very connected to all these different spheres. We're not looking at environment just in isolation anymore at all. I think it's a larger part of where we are in society right now, and it's affecting everything from the economy.
Bring it here when we do these. We have the students used to go to the eco farm where you built the urban forest that was there.
Exactly.
I mean, they had planted those very saplings 3 years ago, and year after year they've been going 2 or 3 times to see those plants. And after 3 years, when there were fruits on them the last time they went. They were so excited. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what experiential learning, the joy on their faces when they drew those pictures to show, okay, the plant that I had planted is the one that
Yeah.
has got an anar on it or a lemon on it. So, these are experiences for a child.
Yeah. In fact, there's that you brought this up. It's good that you brought it up because when I went with the students to the eco farm, I think it was March or April last year, and that had been about 2.5, 3 years since we planted the forest. And Sharetooth was growing at that point on one of the Sharetooth trees. And there's actually an old photo of two students planting the tree 2.5 years back. So I actually showed it to them because I said, this same tree that you planted 2 years back is now giving you fruits that you can take back home. So it was for all of them to actually see that, that trees that they planted, soil that they mixed on their own, from a little sapling of 4 feet tall to now a sapling that's, 15 feet tall almost. And it's giving out fruits that they can take home for their family is commendable for them to see that themselves, to that work paid off. And the same thing in the farm, coming to, of course, the foundation school, by the way, and the Indian school, both the institutions, for everyone who's listening in, have been working in the environmental space for a very, very long time. In fact, they have a space in Sona, in a little beyond, in this place called Dhoj. They have a farm called the Eco Farm is what they call it. And it's actually it's a property that has all kinds of things with regards to environment and for learning. It's actually a learning farm which has, it has a lotus pond, it has a forest that we created together, it has an entire plot is actually dedicated to just vegetable growing. And then there are different science experiments that are there for students. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening just in that farm. And students actually go there regularly. They visit, they actually observe different things, they work with insects, they work with butterflies. So I'd actually like to learn more about that from you, because it's something, of course, I personally have enjoyed working on the project, but I haven't really interacted much with the students or teachers apart from activities that we've done there. But just when they come back from the farm or when they share experiences in the classroom with their teachers, how has that been? If you can speak more about how their journey of actually visiting this space when not so much was happening, and then gradually over the years seeing different things happen there, how has it actually shaped their thought towards environment, towards issues related to environment, and also the work that they've been doing on the ground out there?
I would definitely say that, they learn to appreciate nature. In fact, they come back, and after that, normally it is not left just like that. The teachers do certain activities in order to get a feedback as to what their feeling was after they came back. Of course, the initial excitement that the children have is the bag full of veggies, especially the winter months, that they're not allowed to take any plastic bags because it's the no plastic zone. And they do take their bags, and they come back with a lot of fresh veggies to their mothers. So they're very excited about that. But they do come back and talk about the fresh air, that is the quality of the air. They can really, especially the senior children, come back and say that they can feel the difference in the quality of the air that is there at the breathe. So things like just looking into nature, sitting and writing a poem, maybe sketching, maybe these are things that the children like to come back and do. And I think, as you said, this identification, I mean, personally, my younger days, both my parents have been very avid loved gardening. So I have had that nature connect right from my younger days. And so I think when children are exposed to these kind of farms, they want to identify the leaves, as you rightly said. You may eat a bindi, but you don't know what a lady's finger leaf looks like. You eat a mango, but you don't know what the leaf looks like. You crush it and you smell it. Now, these are things that, in fact, in one class, I don't remember which one, we did have a little quiz once they came back. They were blindfolded, and we gave them leaves that had different kinds of smells, brought them to the farm and asked them to identify what it is. So these are things that children will learn, and it becomes a part of their personality.
Yeah, it does. And I was interjecting in the middle because you mentioned the vegetables bit, and that's something that excites all of us equally. I think every time, even when the teachers are leaving, the first thing they want is that bag of veggies to take back home, because there's so much vegetable that is growing, and all kinds, and especially during the winter season, there's an abundance of vegetables that you actually get to see at the farm.
Remember, that place is totally organic. They have a vermicompost pit. They have these worm towers which are there, which
Yeah.
So, these are all things that their children learn that these do work. It's a sustainable practice that can be replicated.
Yeah.
Even at that lotus pond, in fact, I was very keen that children take out water from there and see the microorganisms that are there.
Yeah.
Maybe it will happen at some point of time, because
Yeah.
that's a nice for a science lesson comes alive there, a
Exactly.
biology
Yeah.
lesson.
Yeah. And it's first time you're actually collecting the sample, which they did with the water in Yamuna as well, where they collect the samples
Yeah,
and
in
really
fact,
see.
one of my
Uh,
visits to Australia, when I went, the school program did have, the environment program did have this, where they took them to the botanical garden. The children will get into their nets, take out water. Then there itself, they had a microscope. And I think that's a wonderful experience.
mhm. And do you think when they some activities of course happen at the farm and at school, and that it's promoting a kind of learning that we don't get to see in every single school or every single institution. But do you think that has there been a way in which these students have gone back home and replicated some of these projects? For example, we worked with them on grey water recycling and setting up a plant. Of course, that's something that requires more people working together, but maybe planting in bottles or other activities. Have you seen that? Yeah.
In fact, things like vertical gardening that we've done, the tire gardens that
Yeah.
we have, tire may be a little too much for them, but vertical gardening, they've definitely taken it forward. And there are parents who come back and tell them that there are children who advise them on what is to be done. It's like your segregation of waste. Bringing them now, we started with composting in school as well. We had started. Now with the lockdown, I don't know what has happened. But so there were children who were bringing in green waste to put it into them once a week.
Yeah.
That composting happens. So the children then start their segregation at home itself. And I think in a city where we live, where there's so much of waste waste management, waste segregation is the first thing that one needs to learn. And if the children are able to make that happen at home, I think that's wonderful.
Hmm. And I think there's a question in the comment section which also relates to what I was going to ask, which is, of course, we're speaking a lot about youth and working with students and how they are actually taking this forward, both in the school as well as in the community at homes. But the question also relates more to how adults or parents or even educators in the school itself. How is one able to actually sustain that learning with the students and make sure that incorporating different kinds of tools on and off, keep changing these tools, modifying these tools based on what you see on the ground, working with these students. How do you strategize something like that? So, in particular, if I ask this question about educators, like you have a team that you work with throughout the year, and I'm sure you all have internal meetings yourself to assess, behavioral changes in students and how that. So, what if you could elaborate more on the process? Do you organize formal trainings, or how does it work in terms of trying to basically looking at the educator's role in this entire scenario?
I was lucky that I had a group of young teachers with me, so they were always full of energy, and they
Yeah.
were digitally, technologically very savvy. So it was that much easier, and I think I was totally into climate, being a climate change presenter myself. I would take the sessions with them myself. So the science of it, see, very often people are told don't do this, but then the science behind it also, the knowledge part also needs to be there. So whether you are a language teacher, whether you are a social science teacher, you need to make sure that you know the science behind it. Why is it happening? And then once they find that, then we have mixed groups by which they sit down together to plan out what is to be done as a project. It is not one single subject, it's always a cross curricular. Now, when the SDGs came about, also then this time we made it into 3 or 4 people. We made a core committee, and then 4 or 5 people took on different kinds of SDGs and then spoke about it, maybe made a board about it, or their class worked on that particular thing and did a little assembly on that. So, I mean, even when you do the SDGs, the entire thing of sustainability comes about in that. And we've done a number of international online projects also, which again, teachers were involved in that. I personally was involved with them, along with the teacher, did a lot of hand holding in order to make sure that it went off. things like making of surveys, and I think surveys and data collection and then an analysis brings about stark facts in front of you, and for a child, there's nothing more realistic, I would say.
Yeah.
And we've done a lot of these international ones as well, on SDGs, especially SDG number 13, which is climate action we've done. So we have, yes. So the staff were totally involved in it. Yes, some of them may need a little more extra hand holding, but there's so much on the net. If you can give them the links, and yes, that is why I said a little bit of feeding all the right input is required.
Yeah, so it's some amount of hand holding that may be required, but as you said rightly, everything is available online. There are experts who anyone can get connected with very easily in different spaces. And of course, they are more than willing to actually come in. Of course, institutions like yours doesn't only work with the Swechha, it works with many people who are working in different spheres. Somebody may be working with birds, somebody may be working with insects, someone with butterflies, someone with water. So the idea is to really create that collaboration and that network, which has of course increased drastically in the last couple of years if you talk about an interconnectivity between all of us working on similar lines, because at the end of the day our goal is to fight this entire issue because everything is connected in one go. It's not that we're looking in any of these projects in isolation. So yeah, thank you for sharing some light on that, because that is something that we all constantly also try to figure out. We try to organize educator workshops as well, because our engagement in the school is limited to maybe a few workshops or a module or a walk or a plantation or different activities that we do, but we're not in the school 24/7 with these students year after year, 365 days a year with them. And that is something that's a space where the educator comes in, where the teachers come in, because they have to actually take up that ownership of running through these different projects with them and making sure that it's sustainable in some way or the other. Are there any kind of tools so for example, like when we run a program, we look at using a pre and post assessment before we run an entire program with the students. So there's a pre-questionnaire and there's a post-questionnaire to sort of understand that behavioral change, if there was any within the students. So just coming to that again, in order to understand behavioral change, if you can maybe tell us a little bit more about specific tools that you may use to sort of identify what's working, what's not working, and how you worked through that in the last couple of years of your work.
See, the entire environment program that we have, the environment and sustainability program, is connected largely to a citizenship program that the school has. So the citizenship program also has different aspects of environment, as well as you could say things like gender equality, which is your SDGs, etc., coming into it. So based on that, we do have a kind of a rubric that we would kind of go through to see what are the kind of, so in the rubric, maybe there would be 4 parameters that we would give, indicators, and then accordingly do that. See, right now we are only to class 8, so we did not have so much, but as they go higher, you would have to be a little more specific, a little more detailed, because you're then looking at them thinking out of the box a little bit, being a little more innovative. But in your middle school classes, especially 6 to 7, you're looking at people who would set an example, take the courage to correct someone if someone has done wrong, especially when they're segregating waste. Someone has put plastic into the biodegradable bin, the child goes and says, hey, what you're doing is wrong. That kind of a monitoring that is going on. Those children need to be recognized, because standing up for something right is very difficult. And you might be called as, nicknamed as something, a rubbish gatherer or whatever, but they do stand up to all those kind of things, and they are standing up for a cause. And these children, very often, I used to call them into my office and I used to tell them, congratulate them for the good work that they have done. So that was like a boost for them. Okay, what I'm doing is correct.
Yeah.
I think recognition, especially when they do things that is very difficult for young children to be standing up for, recognition has to come from.
Yeah, and speaking of recognition, I remember I was in your office some time back, and one of the students came in. I keep forgetting his name, but the one who was the most active in grade 5 And he was one of the SDG leaders. So when you refer to him as an SDG leader, you could automatically see that sense of ownership come into him, because he knows that he is the leader of the group and he has to take charge. And because he may have learned more, or because he may have more of an inclination towards these issues and working on these issues, automatically he gets more inclined and more motivated to do something. So coming from someone who's at a senior position, someone who's an educator, someone who he respects, when he gets to learn more, to get that kind of appreciation from educators, it really motivates him. So I think that's something great that you all have been doing in terms of assigning these leaders and making sure that, of course, the leaders are assigned, but at the same time, it's still a community that you're working with. It's still a group of students together that you're
I
engaging
mean,
with at the same time.
even in their own classes, when they find that someone has done a good job, make it a point to, either give them a badge or some kind of a recognition.
Yeah.
And that is so, even as adults, we find that we all crave for that little bit of attention. So children all the more.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's great that appreciation is given, and it's implemented within the entire structure as well. And one more thing, which I've really actually enjoyed working with the school, and I've seen the school really gives a lot of value to, is in while dealing with these different issues, is to look at really it's very extremely creative ways of engaging students. So whether it's like you said at the beginning, whether it's sketching, or it's sketching at the farm, or it's writing a poem, or leaving them to be directly with nature. And in fact, those sketches that we've seen in the school as well of the farm that some of the students have made, and other tools of using music and storytelling is one of the things that I've seen, which most of your educators use a lot in terms of the way they work with students.
Both Hindi and English, they do a lot of storytelling. Yes. And also a lot of upcycling has been done, even if using waste, kabad se jugaad kind of things, a lot of creative things that teachers have made people do. Then I think you had music sessions as well at the farm, and that's another way in storytelling, of course, is huge. We do a lot of storytelling. Music also, we have also the dance teacher also does it, talking about environment issues and solutions through dance. I mean, the dance teacher also does incorporate a lot of stewardship and environment activities. We do have a cross-cultural, at least in a month, at least one cross-curricular kind of project is done. So it brings all the teachers to collaborate, but I'm sure during this pandemic time, they will have to sit down and look at it digitally. But yes, as I come back to it again, this is the best time to make a community kind of a connect. Make sure that you rework that, because the parents have to step in during this time. It is not happening without the parents stepping in, especially during these days. So when that connect is there, reinforce that, get the things together, make it a survey together, data research. In fact, something that I saw the other day, I was on line listening to a webinar with teachers from about 100 teachers from around the world. And this is a nice way in which you can do during the pandemic an environment project that they could do. The entire class discusses it with the teacher, and then the teacher divides them into groups of 4, and they have something called as a breakout room, I think.
Okay.
And so after 10 minutes of the initial discussion, it is all time bound, and there is a question that they will discuss. So they go out into their breakout room, discuss that to 5 to 6 minutes, come back again into the main room, then each one shares what they have said about it. And again, the second part, so that each module is divided into 4 or 5 questions. So that many times they go out into the breakout rooms and then come back again.
Yeah.
Also, doing projects or researching, or you can even do it on another day. If the children are small, just class 4 and 5 children, maybe you can do it in another way. You give it 2-3 days for a project you plan it out across 2 or 3 days. I mean, we have to look at things like that, because I don't think this is any time getting over.
Yeah.
And right now, everyone, the earth is healing. In fact, it reminds me of a cartoon that I saw the other day, which said the pandemic is the biggest fear just now. The small wave. The next big wave is the recession. And the even bigger wave that is going to come after that is climate change.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's bringing back to the point you mentioned right at the beginning, that everything is so connected to each other. So this is actually just a much
Yes,
smaller,
absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, as in you've also touched upon what I was going to ask you, which is something that we've been trying to work through as ourselves, and also when we spoke with Pragati last week, we had a slightly longer discussion around digital education right now, or virtual learning in post-COVID times, as well as right now during COVID, during lockdown. How the you know entire sphere of education is sort of has been changed overnight, because we have to do it virtually, and we really don't know how long this will be on for, as in how long one will be sitting behind computer screens talking to students, even though schools may reopen very soon, just in terms of social distancing, how it may be. And already you've spoken quite a bit about digital learning things that you've been doing, and of course you've sort of moved away right now from the education sphere completely, or you're still trying to work with different schools, or is it completely?
I have not given myself anything. I think environment will always remain my passion,
Yeah.
and I am with the British Council as their ambassador. Plus, so I will be into education as well, and climate reality is also there. But I'd also like to talk a little bit about the pandemic that is there, and after that, what we
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
to do. See, we might think teachers on school, I mean, everyone agrees on that this is not the time to be completing a syllabus. We're transacting more of a curriculum with maybe not more than one or two concepts in the lower classes, the 3 or 4 in the higher classes. But as teachers, we've always looked at Bloom taxonomy as what we have to transact in a class. But I think right now, what we as educators need to look at is give precedence to the hierarchy of needs that was given by Maslow over Bloom taxonomy. And as someone says, I think you need to make sure that the students develop grace instead of grades, and love instead of testing.
So yeah, thank you so much. I think that it is a very difficult time for all of us. We're all trying to sort of work our way through this, particularly people who are working in this space, people who are working in the experiential learning space, educators who are in school. Everyone is really thinking on their feet and trying to. In fact, just before this session with you, I had a session that me and a colleague of mine were doing with almost 100 students on butterfly gardening. And to be very honest, I'm so used to that face-to-face interaction with students that actually looking at a computer screen gets very difficult to sort of convey what you want. You can't do energizers with the students. You don't have that interaction. You don't get to see expressions of the students when they're listening to you, or when they have a question. It's all through a comment box right now. And it is a tough way to work through the things, but I think, as you rightly said, it's important for us to stay as a community right now and really fight through this. And hopefully we've learned something from this entire pandemic, and we can look at what that larger wave that you're talking about vis-a-vis climate change is, and how we can actually work towards that at a much larger level, which is required at this point. So
Actually, what we need to do is move away from what is a content-driven curriculum to move into more of where you can make the children ask questions, to help them to create and understand what this pandemic is all about. You can take them back to where it started in Wuhan, what is a wet market, where is it that it started. These are things that children don't know these terms. So, I mean, gentle talking and making them learn certain skills that are there. I think skills in order to make the right decisions and being innovative and creative is the need of the hour.
Exactly, and I think that it's good to get into the root area of it, make sure that they're as curious as possible about not just, of course, what has happened in the last 2 months, but largely how this pandemic is not a result of just 2 months and just because of one incident that happened in one, but actually how we've coped with the entire situation, how it's spreading so rapidly, and how, while we are all locked indoors, nature has set the reset button and birds have started coming out and different things have started. How has that overall really affected our environment and the climate in general? So I think as a story, it's a beautiful story to tell students and also to hear back from them and see. Because of course, as in we keep saying this, that they are future change makers. They are people who are really going to take this forward in the long run. And yeah, it's just great to see the kind of work that all of you all are doing on the ground for many, many years. And someone like you is actually very, very inspirational. And I keep saying this, I tell my team, I tell anyone I ever meet that Foundation School and Susan ma'am are doing some phenomenal work on the ground. And it's always a pleasure to really come and spend time.
I've had very fantastic faculty that was behind me, my teachers. I couldn't have done it alone. The
Exactly,
management,
yeah.
all of them were there behind me. They
Yeah,
all
it's always,
agreed to protect me. They believed in me.
yeah. In fact, I have this little bias where whenever Foundation School has a workshop that needs to be done, or if there's a plantation, or if there's a farm visit, I'm always the person who says I'll go because I have a rapport with the students, and that's something that I like to
Yeah, yeah,
continue
they
on.
want to. Ashim sir
So
is their favorite. Class 5, class 7, all of them. They know
yeah.
Ashim sir very well.
So
In
it's
fact,
great.
you
It's
have
great.
because your classes or workshops are not just knowledge based. There is a lot of fun element in that, and I think that's what appeals to the children. The fun element that
Yeah.
is there is a fun way in which they learn.
Yeah. In fact, Yavi ma'am is in the comments she's written just now that we were able to do everything thanks to ma'am and her initiatives. So yeah, it is. It's wonderful to see that you've built a community at Foundation School, and I'm sure that's going to continue for many, many years to come, both with students, with educators, with every single stakeholder that's involved in the school, both the schools actually, to see that there's so much of an
Yeah.
inclination towards these issues, and there's so much work that's actually happening on ground. With that, I'd just like to say thank you so much for agreeing to do this again on short notice, and for taking time out on a Sunday afternoon. I know it's nice to be indoors and be with family right now, but to take time out to talk to me, it's been a while since we connected, so I was glad to really have that
Pleasure.
conversation with you also. And I mean, hopefully we'll get to meet very soon as well and not do this virtually. I keep saying this, I said it to Pragati as well, that we should be able to now hopefully meet very soon and take this forward. But thank you so much, ma'am. I'm sure there will be, I'll go through the comments. If I see some more comments, I can forward them to you if there are any questions.
Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah. So I can
I think
forward
you
those
want.
to you, and
Yeah.
yeah. So thank you so much, and thank you all for joining in. I think today's session was largely looking at an educator's role and looking at how you can actually promote environmental stewards in your school, in your community, and how that's been happening for many, many years. And we're very grateful to have had.
Wherever you are, please play your part. Wherever you are, whether you're an educator or whether you're just a lay person not in the education field, please do your bit. Think of what you can do in order to protect the environment. The earth needs
Yeah.
you. We need the earth to be whole. Thank
Yeah.
you.
As in fact, yeah, we need to be a community now more than ever, and I think that it's happening slowly, but we need to build on it. So thank you so much, Susan ma'am, once again, and hope to meet you soon. Hope to interact with you soon as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll try to do this again next week. Through the week, we'll try and get some more experts on board, some more partners that we have who are working on different issues. So thank you for tuning in. That was Susan ma'am. She has an experience that covers more than 30 years, and she's done some phenomenal work in the environment education space with regards to environment and sustainability. You can also reach out to her directly if you have some questions. Otherwise, I see some questions that are here in the comment section that I will make sure to forward to her. So thank you all for tuning in on a Sunday afternoon. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we'll catch you next week as well.